Hello, and welcome back. My name is Melissa Snow, and welcome to my podcast. We're going to be talking about spooky true stories. This first story, we're just going to jump right in. About 6 or 7 years ago, this girl's grandma, she passed away, and she was talking about 3 or 4 times, give or take, she said, every day for about 2 or 3 weeks after her grandma died, they would get phone calls. It was really low 50s phone call like music, and it was the type of music that her grandma played when she was around the house. So after she passed away, they started getting these phone calls. And then it just started fading away, and a few minutes later it randomly stopped. And the time of all this, she said, and the music choice was really weird because of all things, it was her grandma's favorite music. So when she was younger, her grandma would play this music around the house. And then when she got in a car accident and passed away, this happened. So that was the whole spooky. It was about 40 and 50 music playing softly, and no one would ever say anything. So that was what she said in her story. And on to the next story we go. So in this next story, this girl was at school and her teacher was telling her a story. And she said in high school, their teacher told them this story about when she was home alone and she heard a knock on the door, and this guy was standing there. But she had the screen door locked, but she didn't have the other door locked because she had it open. She was talking to them. And he said he was from the power company, and she said, well, my parents are not home. And so he decided to open the door and force his way in. And so when that didn't work, he got a box cutter from his pocket, and then she ran and hid into the hamper in her parents' closet. And she waited 10 minutes in there. Finally, the police arrived, and then they ended up getting him, but he was in the attic right where she was, but he didn't see her. And the moral of the story is to lock your doors while you're home alone. And the neighbor across the street saw what happened, and they were the ones that called the cops. And she said that whenever she would go home from school, because it stayed in her mind, it scared her, so she would always lock the doors when she gets home. And that's the moral of the story, that she said, home alone for hours, doom. That's what she said. So on to the next. So, this next story is, this girl and her friends went to a concert, and it was about 7 years ago in this story, and they were over by elementary school. After this was done, they drove over by an elementary school. It was 2 a.m. And she had her friends in the car with her, and one of her friends in the car started screaming and then wouldn't tell anybody what was going on. Mind you, it's 2 a.m. and they just got home from a concert, and she's like, you must be exhausted. I don't know why you're doing this. But come to find out, the girl is sensitive to the paranormal. And so she's had some spooky things in her house happen, like hangers flying off the rack and doors opening and glasses falling on the ground. And this girl said she didn't believe in the paranormal, but her friend was like that. So when they got home, they looked up a story because of what she said she saw to her boyfriend. So she told her boyfriend that she saw in the playground a bunch of people with blood all over them. And she didn't want to look out the window again. So come to find out, there was a plane crash there in the 80s. And a lot of people passed away. And that's that story. And on to the next. This next story is kind of creepy, but funny at the same time. So, this kid, when he was younger, his grandparents had a cabin. And they passed away. And this cabin was in the woods. And his mom and dad would take him out there. But every time he would leave, he would say, "Bye, Grandma. Bye, Grandpa. Bye, Scary Man." So about a couple of years later, when he grew up, they were outside and they asked, "Why did you always say that when you left?" The guy's like, "Look at this water heater." And when they looked at the water heater, it looked like a scratchy face, like Scary Man. So every time he would call, "Bye, Grandma. Bye, Grandpa. Bye, Scary Man," he was talking to the water heater, the face on there. And they were like, that was weird. That kind of freaked us out. But yeah, that's that story. And on to the next. Ready, set, go. This next story is when these parents had a kid and was about 3 years old. The dad's brother passed away in a car accident. And so it was Father's Day, and they were going to say Happy Father's Day, but then he ended up crashing and he passed away. So when the girl turned 3 and they tried not to like say anything in front of the little girl and like scare her or anything. So one day her mom was listening to a conversation she was having, and she was in the other room and she was in the kitchen. So the mom goes into the kitchen and her daughter's looking towards the dishwasher, and she's talking towards there. And she's like, "Hey, who are you talking to?" And the little girl said, "I'm talking to Bob." And she's like, "What is Bob saying?" He said, "He's not ready to go yet." And she's like, "Can you describe what Bob looks like?" So she described what Bob looked like, and the mom said it was the uncle, that her little niece's uncle, or whatever, the little girl's uncle. That was the brother that passed away that was going to Father's Day in the car. And she said she eventually hopes that he was able to move forward. So the little girl was talking to a ghost in the kitchen. And that's that story. So this next story is in 1995, this little kid in their school went to a hospital trip, like a field trip to the hospital. So when they went there, the kid with his class were standing there, and he decided to leave and go into a room that he didn't know what was going on. So there was a man in there, and he was about 90 years old. And then he said they were talking about 5 minutes, and they said goodbye. And then when they were at the hospital, his mom and his grandma ended up being there. And then they said, "We have some bad news we have to tell you. Your grandpa, he passed away." And the little boy said, "I know. I came into the room and he was in there and he told me goodbye. And then we talked for 5 minutes, and this was hours before he passed away." And the Mom and Grandma just looked at each other like, what? How did you see him? The little kid goes, well, I was just walking around while everybody was doing the tour, and then I came back, and then I saw you guys. So eventually that old man that he spoke to was his grandfather, his great-grandfather, in the hospital, and then they talked before he passed away. That's kind of creepy, like really creepy. And so that's that story, and on to the next. All right, in this next story, there was a girl, and she was in her room, and she was watching TV, and then she happened to fall asleep, and then she woke up, and then she saw a shadow on the ceiling, and she saw all these like handprints and everything and claw marks on the ceiling, and it just disappeared and went away. So she didn't say anything to her family because they would have thought she was crazy. And so the next day she was doing it all over again. She was watching TV, and then all of a sudden she hears, "How are you today?" Like an old lady's voice. And she freaked out, screamed, packed up all her stuff, and ran down the stairs and fell down the stairs. Her brother was like, "What's going on? Why are you doing this?" And she wouldn't say anything, right? And then her dad came home, and he told her, she told him, what happened. So he gave money to the son and the daughter and said, "Hey, go walk down to the movie theater," because it was close, and he was going to work his magic in the room. So she came back home after the movie, and then some whatever he did worked, but then 3 days later she heard tapping on the wall. And that was her scary story that she experienced that day. And on to the next. All right, this next story is about a Christmas party. And there was 2 roommates that went to a party, and one of them left because they didn't want to be there anymore. So the other one stayed. She got way too drunk, and she had fun, and then came home. So she went outside when she got home and grabbed a beer out of the fridge because she didn't want to go to bed yet, and she went to go smoke a cigarette, and she was facing towards the house. And then her roommate came downstairs and turned the light on, and she waved at him, feeling like a drunken idiot, and then he waved back and got a glass of water. And then he turned the light off and went back to bed, and she thought it was really weird. So after that, she ends up going to bed, and then the next morning he comes down and he's like, "I didn't come out because I didn't want to introduce myself to your friend because I thought you guys were reminiscing and they were from the Christmas party." She's like, "What are you talking about? I didn't come home with anyone." He's like, "I swear to God he was standing behind you. That's why I didn't come out." And she's like, "I swear to you, I did not come home with anyone." And to this day, he swears that someone was out there with her, and that's why he didn't go. And it scared her, and she said it gave her goosebumps and the heebie-jeebies. That's that story, and it's a really scary, and I don't know what I would do in that situation. On to the next. So this next story is about this girl's grandfather. If I'm looking over, it's because I'm looking at the story. But so the next one is about this girl's grandfather that passed away, and she had a maybe 1-year-old son. I guess this kid can talk and everything and react. So they would always go to dinner parties, and then when they were there, the grandpa was there, and this is before he passed away. And when he thought no one was looking, he would always make silly faces at the grandson. So then he passed away, and they all were grieving, and then one night they went to bed, and her son was out in the living room, and he was laughing at 2 a.m. and having fun and giggling and everything. So she gets up to go see why he was in the living room, because she didn't understand why he was out there, and he should have been in his bed. Then he's laughing and laughing, and she's watching him, and she's like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Grandpa's making silly faces." Or no, Papa's making silly faces. And she's like, "What?" And she started freaking out, like, inside, and got scared. And he's like, he's standing right there. He's making silly faces at me. And then she goes and grabs him. And then he's like, "Bye, Papa." And then she turns around. She doesn't see anyone, and it freaked her out. So that's that story. And it's not funny that he's dead, but it's funny that it scared her. So that is the end of the storytelling. And I don't have anything to relate to any of that. Wait, I do. I had a niece. She would always see this kid and call her by a certain name, and I don't want to say it because it scares the crap out of me. And she would always talk at nothing when we were younger. And to this day, it's scary. So I understand some of these things when people talk about this stuff. And I do believe in the paranormal and ghosts and etc. And I have experienced a lot of things on my own. And I keep remembering a lot of things that I experience, and then it makes me laugh because it makes me nervous to this day. Like, I feel like I'm very sensitive to things, and I feel a lot of stuff, and sometimes I just try to ignore it. While I was telling these stories, I saw an orb ghost light from above. That's why I looked up like that when we were talking. I was talking to you guys. So that happened while I was talking to you. And this is an everyday thing. There's not a day I don't see these things. Like I said, I went and got my eyes checked, and they're completely normal, and I don't need glasses or anything. And then even looked inside my eyeballs, like checked to see if I had any diseases and stuff in there, and I don't. So there's nothing wrong with my eyes. And then I said I had headaches too. And so they did a brain scan on my head, and they looked at it, and it was completely normal. So there's nothing wrong with my brain. I just wanted to know if there was something wrong with me, because I don't know what I'm seeing. And sometimes I hear weird stuff, and I have a few stories of my own that I'm remembering that I may share on another video. But this has been my storytelling, and my name is Melissa Snow, and peace out, everybody. Till next time. See ya. Bye.